for those previous sessions that have been recorded, but they are going to focus, sessions 1 through 4 are really going to focus on that word recognition piece. Okay. And these sessions in content literacy are really focusing on that upper part, that language comprehension. And something I really just want to make really clear, I've been talking to a lot of different people, both in Louisiana and even nationally recently, that have been talking extensively about the science of reading, which I'm so excited about because, you know, the research is extensive on really how we learn to read. But I feel like some people get hung up on that bottom, and that's what they think the science of reading is, only that. And it really isn't. It's a culmination of all these things. And so if any of you have taken the science of reading training, there's usually a module on each one of these things, or sometimes multiple modules on different aspects or areas of it. And the last thing I want to say about this before we really dive in is that you can work on both of these simultaneously. So if you have students in your 7th grade classroom and they are on a 2nd grade reading level, you definitely need some work in word recognition, but you can still help them develop their language comprehension skills as well. You can still help develop their exposure to background knowledge and develop their vocabulary and understanding of syntax. So I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that. And just once again, because I started the recording a little bit late, we are on session 7, creating a claim of our double series. So let's jump into that. So we've been talking about this content literacy series, and we said that it builds proficiency within the 4 areas of literacy: reading, writing, speaking, and listening, using our high quality instructional materials in a whole class setting. And so there's some different things we can do in small group, but this series really focuses on that whole group, what to do there inside of your Tier 1 instruction, what's happening in Tier 1 instruction. And we said that they're divided between reading, writing, and speaking and listening. So we've talked about actually a good bit of the reading strategies already. Next week, we're going to dive in to direct and explicit vocabulary instruction. But this week, we're in our writing component, specifically creating a claim. And then coming soon, like I said, is the discussion tracker, the Socratic seminar, and the fishbowl discussion. So what is even the purpose of creating a claim? I don't think we need to talk extensively about this today because I think everybody kind of knows why it's important. But what's most important is that the students understand why it's important. And the students really need to understand the purpose of why do they even need to write a claim, and how is that useful, and how will that be useful later. So to understand what good writing looks like so that students can duplicate good writing across the content areas. In essentially every subject, they're going to have to write a claim of some sort. To understand the steps involved in writing a strong claim so that the claim can be developed through the writing. If you don't have a strong claim, the development of your writing is going to be lacking as well because there's nothing to anchor it to. To synthesize information from a variety of sources and for a variety of purposes. And so sources could include text, graphs, charts, maps, tables, pictures. And this is why it's such a great strategy to use across all of our different content areas. Today's model and example comes from a social studies class or lesson, but I want you to kind of just to think about whatever content area you teach or you support, it's going to look the exact same way. And today's example really has the students taking a variety of sources and kind of compiling those because I'm modeling the question for an end of unit assessment. So creating a claim in action, where do we even start with this? So first, you're going to preview or create the writing prompt or question. Sometimes there's one included in your materials. Sometimes there's one, but you're like, hey, it could be a little meatier. It could have more substance to this question so they can really develop their writing around it. So, feel free to do that. Review the elements of a good claim or introduce the elements if you have not already done so. And we'll talk about some elements of a good claim in just a second. Communicate the purpose of the support to the students. I say it every week. That's the most important piece, especially with secondary students. They have to know the purpose of this support. Why are they using it? Why do they need it? So they really have that buy-in. Then I always have, I display and discuss the definition of a claim. Typically in my classroom, this is on an anchor chart, the definition of the claim. And we'll talk about what I have underneath that because I'm constantly referring to this. In the beginning of the school year, their claims look a little rough because maybe they've never even seen somebody model a claim for them. But as the school year progresses, they're looking back at this anchor chart and they're looking back at really what the purpose of claim writing is, the definition of it, and what makes a good claim. So they're constantly reevaluating their own claims as they're writing them, and their proficiency just grows throughout the school year. Then you want to fully break down the prompt so that students know what is asked of them. If they're already proficient with this step, just allow them time to do so. So I used to call this task analysis, and it's where you put the question or the prompt up and you chunk it and you help them break it down or digest it so that they can fully answer the entire question. The questions that are asked in our high quality instructional materials sometimes are asking the students to do a lot. And so teaching them a process to really break this down so that they and start to internalize that process when they see a very challenging question. Okay, so once we have done that, once we've reviewed what a good claim looks like, we talked about the purpose of it, we broke down the question, it's time for us to model what a good claim looks and sounds like. You want to do a think aloud so that students know how to recreate one. The hardest part about teaching writing is that sometimes we don't know how to put words to it. We don't know how to make steps out of it. And hearing your thinking and creating the claim really helps them to adopt that thinking, and it becomes their thinking when they're developing their own claims later on down the road. Label what makes it a good claim after, and the process you went through to create it. And so another strategy that's super helpful with this is the one called using student exemplars. It has some more good information on that modeling piece if you need more help there. So I told you on my anchor chart at the top, I had the definition. Under the definition, this is what I had under it. These are some things to keep in mind. And all of the things I really want to say, all of the things in this entire series are all research-based, guys. Everything is research-based. So feel good about that when you're rolling it out too. So first thing you should keep in mind as a student, as a writer, is your claim should explain what the entire paper or what the entire paragraph will be about. So sometimes we just want to write a claim statement for a paragraph. Sometimes we need this claim, or we call it a thesis statement, sometimes in ELA, and it's what the entire paper will be about. But it needs to be the central focus. It needs to be all encompassing of what the entire paper is going to be about. It should be clear and concise. Claims should not be overly wordy, and they should get straight to the point. There should be ample evidence to defend your claim or argument, but that information is reserved for the sentences after the claim. The claim should only be your answer. We need to have things that can defend that claim, and that needs to be written. The claim needs to be written in a manner that you can defend it with that evidence, but we don't put the evidence in the claim. The claim should be stated as a fact. We shouldn't say, in my opinion, or I feel that. It should just be the fact of the paper. The claim should be written with the proper style and the proper audience of the purpose of your paper. Typically in our academic settings, especially in our content areas, they're for a very academic purpose. So we want to keep, first and second person point of view kind of out of that, stick to more general academic style. Be sure to place your claim in the proper spot and model that for students. Like I just said, if you're writing a paragraph, the claim is going to be your topic sentence. It's going to be that first sentence in the paragraph. If you're writing an essay, it's going to be the last sentence in your introductory paragraph typically. So modeling that for them and helping them to know where and when to put it. Okay, so let's say that this is my class and I'm going to roll this support out. I'm going to say, good morning, class, or good afternoon, class. Today, you will create a claim for our Unit 1 assessment. And remember, practicing claim writing allows you to see what good writing looks and sounds like so that you can duplicate it on your own. It will also help you to understand how to develop your claim and synthesize information from all kinds of sources. Also remember, a claim is an argument you're making as a writer in response to a question, and it can be backed up with reasons and evidence. So let's start by looking at and breaking down the prompt. And then I would have our prompt displayed on my Promethean or on my whiteboard. And so here's our prompt. How did challenging the British government lay the foundation and shape the American identity? How did challenging the British government lay the foundation and shape the American identity in its earliest years? And so we have been working on this for the entirety of Unit 1. And when you're thinking about and starting to process this question, we're thinking about all of the sources that we've read, that we've annotated, that we filled out graphic organizers on. You can use any of your materials when you're answering today's question. But we really want to come up with the main answer. So let's go ahead and think about how we did this. The first part of the question is, how did challenging the British government lay the foundation? So here's what I would actually have on my whiteboard, on my Promethean. I would start generating possible responses to that and writing those out underneath it. Challenging the government laid the foundation because it showed them how to stick up for themselves, how to seek representation that they didn't already have. I would be listing those things. And we have a second part of our question. The second part of our question says, and shape the American identity in its earliest years. So something that was really important to the Americans and their identity in the beginning was this idea of freedom and democracy. They were tired of a monarchy. They were tired of being ruled from somebody far away, and they didn't have a say in what was going on in their government. So again, those are kind of brainstormed down. Now I'm going to think about what are the strongest answers that I've kind of brainstormed and put those together in a sentence. Okay. And we're going to refer to our anchor chart for claim writing. And that's when I would go back to these things that are on my anchor chart. And we would kind of check through those. So this is really important. For the purposes of this presentation, I have it to where it's kind of blacked out. I really discourage you from kind of putting a claim that you already wrote up there and not talking through it first. At the very least, kind of blacking it out so it can kind of speak through the different parts of it. But even the best thing is to write it out as you're thinking it out so students can see your thought process and how that becomes a statement or a claim. Okay, so our claim that we're writing about together is, by challenging the British government, Americans laid the foundation to be self-reliant and self-governing. It also created an identity of freedom and democracy. Okay, and so now is when I would come back with the students, and I get kind of messy with this part. I'll number one on the side. What is the first thing we did? Number two, what's the second thing we did? So the first thing we did was we brainstormed possible solutions to the answer, or we broke down the prompt if we even need to go that far back. Number two, I selected the best response. Number three, I created a sentence. And, sometimes if we're trying to help them build more complex sentences and have more complex ideas, I might even get as specific as saying a complex sentence with a semicolon to really model what exactly their answer or their claim should look like. Number four, I used my checklist, my anchor chart checklist, to see if I met all the criteria of what my good claim is supposed to have. Okay, so we go through all that. I have steps on the side and make sure it's very clear they understand how I got that answer. If you're modeling the question that they're using to write about, I encourage you to pick a very not obvious answer. Pick one that they wouldn't probably think of, but still show them how you can justify that with evidence and reasons, or using a separate question that kind of has to do with the content so that you're not taking their obvious answer and they have to scramble for something to write about. So that's really important when you're picking what to model for them as their claim. This is not something that you have to do every day for sure. This practice is best used. It can be used anytime throughout the week, throughout the unit, but it's best used with those really meaty questions because then you have a very well-developed claim. But I use this in my daily lessons. If there was a daily question that we had to answer, I would model how to do that on a smaller scale, and we would work our way up to this. It's also how many times you model this is going to be determined by your class's proficiency when doing this. So say I did that just now with you as a class, and we went through it, and now I release them to write their own claims. And I tell them be sure to refer to our example as well as the anchor chart, and I'm circulating to look to see what they're starting to write. And I'm noticing that about half the class really does not have a well-substantiated claim. It's either not answering the entire question, or it's not something that can really be justified with a lot of evidence. There's something in the criteria that they're missing. I would bring them back together. We would go back through the steps. Maybe I need to add a step in there. Maybe I need to tell them, okay, let's go back to our annotations in these different sources and pull from there. It's going to depend on what they look like. It's also going to tell me how many times I need to model this practice. So maybe I do this and the class is proficient and I only have to model it once within a unit. Maybe I release them and they really aren't strong claims. And so I might have to do this once a week or once every other week. But just being very purposeful in where you choose to plug that in within your scope and sequence, because it's a really big payout because their claim looks good. But this isn't just about writing a good claim. Their ability to write a claim tells you their ability to read and comprehend what they had to read and comprehend. Did they do it? Were they successful in doing that? It also tells you where they're at with their ability to kind of synthesize all this different information and put it together. It tells you where they're at grammatically. It tells you where they're at with their vocabulary and using their vocabulary they're learning about in the different subject areas. Claim writing tells you a lot of things about, especially a secondary student. So I love this practice. I love this support. You can really go deep with it. You can scaffold it as much as you need to. You can add as many probing questions into the model as you have to, or be even deeper in your thinking. If you have an advanced class and you're really trying to push them, you just have the opportunity to really customize this strategy and the support for your students in your class. Okay, put that back there. Okay, so some next steps. The next thing I want you to do is look at some upcoming lessons or assessments to decide where this strategy would be most valuable. And like I said, you can refer back to that using student exemplars as part of the writing process if you want some additional help with that modeling piece. Print or bookmark the support so that you can refer back to the explicit directions. I'm going to show you what it looks like in just a second. Ask yourself after the lesson, if you highlighted the intentionality required from the support, are you noticing a difference as a result of the implementation? If the answer to that is no, or you're not happy quite with where it is yet, go back to the support, read through the steps again, and then kind of think about what you can add to your model, what can you add to your steps, but kind of think through there. Let's pull up the support so you can kind of see what it looks like. Okay, so all of the supports are formatted this way. At the very top, it tells you when it can be used within the different content areas. And guys, all of the different content areas at the State Department read through these and provided feedback on these. So I think that's great, because if you have a science teacher and you're trying to understand where this fits, they even put the learning progression for science and engineering practices in there. So everything is just very aligned to their content areas. The purpose and the importance of communicating that purpose. Like I said, there's very detailed steps. Everything I just went over with you is in the support document. I know I'm successful when. So if you don't see this happening completely, keep going back through that support and doing it again, or do it more intentionally, like I said. This is something for this support in particular that's really important. These additional considerations are at the end of the supports. I wanted to talk about what these could potentially look like inside of the support. So students with disabilities or English language learners may need additional support, such as sentence frames. So this was a really big, burly claim that I wrote here, right? And if we have special education students, not all, like if we have lower level special education students, or if we have English language learners at the level 1 or level 2 level, this may be very kind of daunting for them. So I want to give them a sentence down. I might say, the question was, what was the question? It's right here. How did challenging the British government lay the foundation? Challenging the British government laid the foundation by, and then give them a blank there. And it shaped the identity by, and leave them a blank there. This provides them some scaffolding. You want to eventually start to take that scaffolding away by the end of the year, like start slowly pulling some pieces off of it. But this gives them something to start with when they're writing something as complex as a claim like this. Students may also benefit from a review of how to annotate for an answer, so that they know how to locate an answer before they go to write their claim statement. If they've done all this learning throughout the entire unit and they can't find their annotations, or they didn't have good annotations, they don't know how to pull from the annotations, they might need that. And either a mini whole group lesson, like for 5 minutes, or it might be if you have small group time for 5 or 10 minutes, pulling them in your small group to go back over that skill to help them springboard into writing their claim statement. Also be sure to model how to extract information from all types of sources. So if you're teaching with graphs and charts and maps and tables and pictures, you have to model that throughout the unit and throughout the lesson, so that students don't get to the end and wonder, oh my goodness, how do I extract information or evidence from a picture, right? Helping them to see how to do that. And see annotating guidance for more assistance with this support. All students who need extra support should have clear steps for how to duplicate, and may even benefit from small group instruction with additional model and an additional think aloud. So if I did this model for the whole class that I just did, and I know I have these 4 students who are going to need some more support before I release them to independent practice, I can pull them to my table or a little desk group I have in the back of the classroom, and I can do another model, or I can make sure they really understand where those 4 steps came from. Collaborative groupings are also a great structure for additional support. So we could give this as an added layer of scaffolding here too. So say that I modeled one. say I gave them collaborative groupings where I have some mixed ability kiddos in each group. I gave them another task to do this and talk through before I release them to independent work. Could be another added layer of support there too. Allow students to brainstorm possible claims in their groups or give each other feedback prior to checking it on their own claims that they're writing. Model what these conversations should sound like and circulate to ensure they're meaningful. So sometimes, especially again in secondary, we put them in groups, we tell them, okay, go ahead and write each other a claim, give each other feedback, but they don't know exactly, they might say that's a good claim or that's a bad claim. We have to model for them what language we want them using, what that might sound like. And we want to use the criteria when we're doing that. So if they're reviewing each other's claims, and I notice they have like, it looks like almost a paragraph is their answer for their claim. I might model a piece of feedback by saying, okay, do we think that's clear and concise? How can we make that more clear and concise, but modeling that feedback for them so they know how to use that in their groups as well. Huge engagement strategies here though, too, if you're working on engagement in your classroom. All right, so closure. Claims have to be made in all content areas, and it's a skill that most students could use more support with. Typically when I was teaching, almost every student really could have worked on this. Even my advanced students really could have used more work, but especially my students, my inclusion students definitely needed more support with this. When students see good writing on a regular basis and talk through how that writing was developed, they become more proficient writers. They don't even have a choice. They just have to do it. I would have years that my students came in and they were writing their exit tickets in Portuguese at the beginning of the year because they're a newcomer. By the end of the year, they were writing really good sentences because they saw me doing this often and talking through how I did it. This strategy allows you to customize the support needed to an entire class of students and can also be customized further in that small group setting like I was talking about. So just so many possibilities for this support and this strategy. Okay, let's see. If you have any questions or comments, as always, please don't hesitate to reach out to Louisiana Literacy at la.gov. I would love to hear your questions, your comments. If you're doing this in your school system, I would love to get some pictures from you too to kind of see what it looks like, or even visit and kind of talk through if you need to talk through it more. But I hope you enjoyed today's session.